Right, this is episode 1 of the Tom Emberley podcast. And I want to talk as honestly and as true to myself as I can today. And I want to get into some things, and I hope somebody finds some enjoyment about what I have to say. But I want to get into I just want to talk. The first thing I want to talk about today is why I've decided to do this. And I think this is important to talk about because it might just help some other people realise that they're not alone. One of my biggest struggles this year has been identifying what it is I actually want to do with myself. I went through a long time when I used to write music, I used to rap, and I went through doing that for a few years, and progressively I lost my enjoyment and I just didn't want to do it so much anymore. And eventually at the start of this year I got to the point where I thought, actually, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. That was a really difficult time for me, mainly because it pretty much suspended my entire life. All I was doing pretty much all the time was music. And when I didn't do that anymore, I thought, well, fuck, what do I do now? You know, it was literally all I did. And it was all I enjoyed doing until I didn't. The problem that came with me stopping doing music was the fact that I got this feeling of, fucking hell, I'm not doing anything. You know, I'm not working towards anything. And I really hated that feeling because I just felt like a bum. I didn't like the idea of the fact that I wasn't going towards anything. So in the process of that, I went into looking at philosophy, looking at psychology, just looking at basically how the mind works. And that was large in part due to some other things that happened at the start of this year that I'm going to get onto later. And the point is, I went on to something else. I went into looking at these mindful sort of topics and really going ham on that. And that in itself posed its own problem, because then I'd have people asking me about, oh, what, you know, are you still doing music? And I'd say, no, that's not what I want to do anymore. And I'd start talking about the fact that I'm interested in philosophy or psychology. And I'd say, oh, yeah, I'm studying it. And then you get into this conversation where you're like, oh, where are you studying? And then you get that awkward silence where you're like, well, I'm not actually studying it. I'm sitting at home watching videos about it. And that got me into a really uncomfortable position because I still felt like a bum. I thought the thing I was trying to get away from, in the sense of not feeling like a fucking idiot doing nothing all the time because I'm no longer doing music, I tried to get away from that feeling by putting myself forth towards this psychological study, and I still feel this way. And that pissed me off because I thought, well, hang on, I'm doing quite a lot of work now, and if you compare what I'm doing now to what I was doing with music, I'm actually doing more work. So why do I not feel like I'm doing work? And on one side of this thing, I realised that the reason I didn't feel like I was doing work is because I really enjoyed what it was that I was doing. I really enjoyed looking into things and studying philosophy and genuinely putting my time towards that. That in itself was a big reason as to why I didn't and don't feel as though I'm working. But the biggest reason, and the reason why I'm doing this podcast today, and I'm going to fucking send it and just go, this is what we're doing now, is I didn't have a purpose that I was wanting to go towards. I was noticing that I'm making these videos. You'll see on the channel that I'm making, you know, little self-help guru type videos, but I don't really know what I'm doing with them. I'm kind of just doing them. And I get stuck between trying to be all eloquent and smart and talking properly and trying to actually be who it is that I am. I'm trying to actually express myself as a person. And I feel like I'm getting this muted sense of who it is that I am when I do the videos, because I'm trying to present myself, and I'm trying my best at this point in time right now to just be exactly who it is that I am and just fuck that off and go, you know what, I'm just going to be who it is that I am. And what I realised was the thing that I genuinely wanted to start YouTube for, and that I really enjoyed doing above everything else, was talking about things that I'm interested in. And talking about things that I'm interested in a way that I am comfortable doing. I'm not a particularly academic person. It's just not the way that I am. I like to think that I know things, I know a few bits and bobs, but I don't like talking about it in this polished, like plumbing mouth sort of way. It just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. I want to talk about things in a conversational set. I want to be a pub going philosopher. I want to talk like someone who's in the pub, but with the intellect of a philosopher. I don't even drink, but that's the best way that I can put it. I want to be the common man. I want to be understandable and sociable, but talk about eloquent things and talk about big ideas and talk about interesting stuff. And I realised that doing the channel the way that I was doing it just does not do that. I don't care for it that way. And I was finding myself researching some philosophy stuff, and I thought, you know what, I want to make a video. And then at the moment I'm watching Diary as a CEO, how I make 1.2 million a year from this podcast. So I looked at that and I was like, you know what, fuck it, just go and do a podcast. That is actually what you want to do. And the more that I thought about it, the more I realised actually podcasting is what I want to do. So I think understanding that actually having a goal and something you're actually going for is really important, because I spent so much time, and by spent so much time, I mean I've spent all of my life up until about 7 minutes ago thinking that I am not doing enough and I'm not working properly. And it's because I don't actually have a definite goal and a thing that I actually want to do. Now, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but podcasting genuinely seems like the thing that I'm interested in doing. And what I would like someone to take away from that is that I always knew when I started this that podcasting was kind of the way that I wanted to go. And for whatever fucking stupid reason, I just didn't do it. I tried to intellectualize things and make things all and interesting in some fucking stupid way that I just don't like doing. And I kind of strayed away from who I am as a person in that sense, because I'm not that person. I'm not the person that makes the 10-minute self-help guru-y videos, because that's just not who I am. And I don't think it should be who I am either. I like to think that I know enough things to help someone, but not enough to change people's lives in some... I don't know, man. It's... On one front, I want to change. I want to help people. But equally well, who am I to put out a video saying this is what you need to do? Well, you can do what you like. What the angle that I would prefer to go at it from is, this is what I think, and maybe you like it. And I think that is what podcasting does. I think podcasting does things from an angle in which you go, that's the way that he thinks. Maybe I could look into that. Not, this is the way that things are done, go do it this way. I just don't like that. So yeah, the point that I'm getting to is basically I want to do this podcast, and I want to do this because it's what I genuinely want to do. And I feel it's important to remember and look inward into your heart of hearts and realise what it is you genuinely want to do. Because I think a lot of the time we do actually know what it is that we want to do. We already have an understanding of the kind of angle we want to go. We might just not go there because we're scared to go there, or we're uncomfortable in whatever capacity to go and do it. And basically, fuck that. So the second thing that I want to talk about today is breakups. And I want to talk about breakups today because I think the breakup that I went through at the start of this year was the most influential thing I have ever experienced. Now, as someone who's been in the self-improvement, red pill, whatever the fuck you want to call it, industry for about 2.5 years now, I was a fat bitch, and then I decided not to be a fat bitch. And yeah, about 2.5 years. And in that time, Obviously, as I touched on there, I went into music. I really liked music. Music kind of was the first step out of being a prick. And then from there, obviously, David Goggins and shoes at some point in there. And I became a pretty decent person. But I became a pretty decent person in the comfort of someone else. And I'm not going to shit on that person, but she and I were not compatible by any means at all. And in her company, I found myself really comfortable. And I found myself comfortable in the sense that I felt like I was much better than I actually am. And I found myself looking about thinking that I had massive fucking testicles when actually they're shriveled up and small. And I was just walking around with this level of ego that was completely unjustified and at that toxic, because when invariably, as I say, at the start of this year we split up, then I got to this point where I realised, I was like, fuck, I don't have that comfort anymore. And now I realise actually I'm a bit of a bitch, and I've kind of just been hiding behind this self-help thing, this self-improvement thing. I've kind of been hiding behind it because I've been doing hard things and I've been improving myself, but I've been doing it in a realm of comfort, and everything's fucking easy when it's comfortable. And that's what I found was, I thought I was this self-sufficient Goggin disciple fucking G, until I realised actually, no, you're just really comfortable and you've had someone sitting next to you for the last 2 years telling you how amazing you are, and your head is massive. So when we split up, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, irrespective of the way that she and I bounced off of each other and how things actually were between us. That was fucking awful. It was really shit. And in that time, it took me a long time to realise that actually it was the best thing that possibly could have happened to me. But when I realised actually this is the best thing that could possibly have happened to me, I started to grow in a sense that I was moving towards who I actually thought I was, in that sense. The person who thought he was a fucking G that could take anyone on because he went to one Muay Thai class ended up going, actually, I'll probably get my head kicked in if I carry on like this. Let me go and do this properly and let me go and try myself out. And yeah, man, I found myself after that breakup realizing that actually I'm kind of a piece of shit, and I need to work on the things that I say that I'm working on, and I actually need to go for it. I need to stop fucking sugarcoating shit and gaslighting and just basically telling lies. You know, I got into this state where I would tell people that I'm doing things, and by that I meant I have done this thing, not I'm doing it. I would say, oh yeah, I'm studying this, and actually I haven't fucking done anything for the last week, so I no longer have the title to say that it's something I'm studying because you're not doing it anymore. And I closed the gap between being that person and being someone who actually does what they say they do. And I think, to be honest, large in part, all of the progress that I've had this year has been because of that breakup. I think if in an alternate universe I was still with this person, I genuinely think I would be living a pretty fucking shit life, because I wouldn't be being honest to myself. I honestly think I'd probably be doing somewhat the same, if not the same, as what I was doing. So the important thing to remember with that, and I think it is something that's genuinely important to remember, is that when we lose things and when bad things happen to us, they so often present an opportunity for good things to come into play. You know, Chris Williamson gave such a good example and perspective on this, because he said, would you pay the price of your pain for the product of your growth? So would the pain that you've endured basically be worth what it's got you? And when I looked at my life from that angle, and I thought, Would every single day that I've hurt and been jealous and lustful and angry and all the rest of it, would all of those hours of time, days, months of time, are they worth what you are now? And when I looked at that, it was an unequivocal yes. I couldn't look at it as any other way, but yeah, do you know what? That shit was really good for me. And I do think this is something that should have more light cast on it by people, you know, as much as we can, because when bad things happen, obviously our knee-jerk reaction is to feel terrible because we're human, that's how we work. But it's quite difficult to take yourself to a place where you go, actually, this might be good for me. And my experience is a perfect example of this, because I did feel as though I was pretty much king of the world, and I felt as everyone bowed down to me. And when you get broken up with, when you feel like everyone loves you and you're completely impervious, that kind of pulls the rug from underneath you, and you realise, actually, I'm not that cool. I'm not hot shit. I'm not as much as I think I am. And this kind of aligned with a few different things in the time with me. I stopped being mates with my best mate at the time. I had some family issues. And basically, I had like 2 months of losing all of my connections bar like 2. And in that time, as I say, it was quite nasty because of who I was at the time and what it meant to that person's ego. To a person with an inflated ego that revolves around the fact people are interested in him, to all of a sudden have people not be interested in you is quite the wake-up call. But it is exactly the one that I needed, and I'm glad that I had it. So keep that in mind. If you find yourself, which you will, in a shit position that you don't enjoy and you realise actually life is pretty crap at the moment, try your best to look at things and go, well, you know, is this what I need? Is this what I need? Because for me, that was the only remedy for my inflated, egotistical, narcissistic weakness. The only thing that would have worked to get me moving in a different direction was to have that rug pulled from underneath me and have people walk out of your life. That was the only thing that would have worked in that position. If I'd carried on the way I was going, I would still be feeling that way, and I wouldn't have as much self-worth as I do now. Now, by no means am I the most confident of people. I'm just not. I never have been. But I'm better than I was, and I think large in part of that is because I've had to learn to appreciate myself in a genuine capacity. You're not looking at it from this idealistic, narcissistic way. You're looking at it for the facts, and you can look and you go, actually, you know, I'm all right. I did those things, and I did what I said I'd do, and, you know, not so bad. So yeah, with that, I do want to talk about my buzzed head as well. And I want to talk about the buzzed head because I think it goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about. I used to have long, luscious locks. I was like Sandra Bullock, but more of a bloke. And so Brad Pitt, I suppose. And basically, I was so invested in how I looked. When I had that breakup, I still had this residual thing of, oh yeah, well, whatever, I know I'm hot shit, you know, I'll just go and find someone else. Didn't find anyone else. And I realised, I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, you know what? You are taking so much of your worth from stupid fucking follicles on the top of your head. You're not actually looking at things and going, hang on, let me be the best version of myself that I can be. You're looking at things and going, how can I look like the best version of myself? That is stupid. And I realised it was stupid. And I was like, you know what? This has got to go. I can't keep hiding behind this idea that I think people find me attractive, especially when you're not getting any attraction. You know, I was in a position where I was like, hang on, I thought it was attractive, but you're not getting any any potential suitors. So, you know, how is that? How are you doing by hiding behind that? Because it's not even fucking working. So, in short, I buzzed my head, and since then I realised actually it is important that you realise who you are underneath it all. It's really important that you do not have an inflated ego that rests in anything. You can have an ego. You should have an ego. I think this is a misconception that people get fucking smashed into them in school, is that you shouldn't be egotistical because it's arrogant. And those two things are very different. You can have an ego, and to an extent you can even have arrogance and be a perfectly kind, good person who is not up themselves. And realizing now that actually my confidence and my ego comes from things that I've actually done and the person that I actually am, puts me in a position where I go, well, you know what? I'm alright to be on my own, and I'm alright to do this, and I don't need your respect, and I don't need your, I don't need your positive approval of what I'm doing. I want to do it because I know that I want to do it. This in itself is a topic that I struggle with unbelievably. I have never ever been a person who is capable of genuinely not caring about what other people think. It was a conversation that I had with my good pal recently about the fact that he just really does not care what people think. I think some people say, oh yeah, I don't care, and you're like, yeah, well, if we put two girls in front of you and they both reject you, you might shrivel into your own. I genuinely don't think he gives a fuck. He doesn't seem to understand in the best possible way what it means to give a fuck about what people think. And I was thinking about this perspective, and I thought, do you know what? That's not something that I'm necessarily capable of doing. I think some of us are put in positions in which we just can't. We're never going to get to a point where we don't care. The best we can do is get to a point where, irrespective of the fact that we do care, we do it anyway. There was a philosopher that said that, but I'm not smart enough and I cannot remember who it was that said it. But someone said that. And yeah, I think some of us get to the point where we just go, you know what, maybe I do care and I am uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway. And others are just fucking champs from the beginning and don't care. That in itself, I think that's the biggest lesson that I've had this year, is trying to get as close as I can to not caring. And realising actually, you don't need to care about people. It's such a... I think it is a worldwide epidemic, if that's the right word. I think so many people struggle with this idea of not doing things and not being who they want to be because of someone else. And it's tragic. It is really tragic, because you go, hang on, I'm not being myself. I'm not being who it is that I genuinely want to be. And I'm not being who I wish I could be because of someone else. And that is really sad. And it's something that ails all of us, me included, to a fucking big extent, might I add. And without getting too sad about it, I think it's important to remember that one day we're going to die. And with that, when you come to die, what actually matters? It's so hard to look at things from this angle because it's so far in the future and we just don't see things that way. For whatever reason, the human brain cannot really process future in a... It's difficult for us to actually understand what the future is. We have a concept of things and we understand that future will come, but it's quite hard, if you actually think about it, to look at things like death and realise that that will come one day. It is for me, at least. And obviously it will. And when you do that, you realise, you're like, oh, if I want to do this thing, how much does it actually matter if it works or if it doesn't? How much does it matter if I go and speak to that girl and she goes, "Ugh, fuck off, you're so bald." You know, what does it actually matter? It doesn't. But then we're still in this position where we can't bring ourselves to just go and do something just because we want to do it. And it's a shame. It is a genuine shame, because there will come a day when you die and nothing matters because you're dead. And at that point, whatever comes afterwards, it will no longer matter. And even, in a micro sense, if you do pretty much anything except, kill your wife, whatever it is that you do won't matter in like a minute's time. If you walk down the street, jiving out, dancing, doing whatever you want to do, singing at the top of your lungs, that is like the most extravagant thing you could do in the modern era, except do it naked. And how many people would actually remember that you did it tomorrow? Someone might have like a fleeting memory of going, "Oh, yeah, bloke dancing down the street, I bet he's having a good time." But, bloke dancing down the street, what a fucking idiot, look at him, I bet he's on drugs. Whatever perspective they have, they might have that thought once more in the next 10 years. Like, what does it matter? And even at that, they could have that thought every single day for the rest of their life. And what does it matter? What impact does that have? For one, you probably never see this person ever again. So what the fuck does it matter if they're thinking about you on the other side of the world? And two, we get into this position, we get this catastrophizing that goes on whenever we do anything that is uncomfortable or that we're not sure about doing. Or if we think it's going to be terrible, we think something awful is going to happen as a result of what we're doing. But there are so few things that you do that are anywhere near as bad as you think they are. If you look at the best example for me is, I am unbelievably pussy level terrified of speaking to women. I find it so hard. And I find it so hard to the point where I've done it twice this year, both at the start of this year, and I'm trying my best to stop being a vagina about it and just go and do it. Point is, in my head, the cognitive function that's going on in there is like, oh my god, fucking everything's going to go wrong, everything's going to be terrible, and we're going to die as a result of this. Now, what is the most likely thing that's going to happen? She will, most likely, I'll go over, try and be slick, and probably be incapable of actually getting past the syllables of hello. I'll probably stumble on the first one, and then we'll start talking for a bit. She might notice the fact that I don't have much hair, and given the fact that she says no or she says yes, whatever happens doesn't even matter. If she could come up to me and go, "What the fuck, get away, you look like a naked mole rat," and it doesn't actually matter. She'll walk on, I'll go the other way, and I'll carry on looking like a mole rat. And it's not going to make any difference. Nothing is going to happen. In my head, I think, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever. I'm so uncomfortable. And you get uncomfortable. You're like, oh my God, I hate what I'm doing right now. I remember I walked over to this girl, this French girl. She was sat on a bench, right? I walked past her, looked at her. I was going to go over and say something then, but I didn't. I just walked past. Then I went and sat on a bench somewhere else, and I was like, oh, fuck's sake. I've got to walk back that other way. I'm going to do it. I walked over, tried to sound cool, didn't, and pretty much within like 10 seconds of talking, I was like, oh, can I sit here? And I kind of completely forgot that actually you need to introduce yourself and this person needs to know you're not a fucking weirdo before you sit down. And I actually, in fairness, I ended up saying something pretty slick. She was French and she was reading a French book, and I did actually speak enough with her for this knowledge to be acquired. And she was wearing like this nice coat, and I was like, oh, that's where the style must come from, because you're French. Some shit like that. And I went past the bench and I actually sat in a room next to this field that I was in, And I was like, oh my God, that was the worst fucking thing ever. And I actually felt like a subhuman. It was so uncomfortable. But then I realised, like, to this day, that happened, what, 6 months ago? Something like that? Maybe longer. And I very rarely think of it. This is the first time I've thought of that in a long time. And even now, I look and I'm like, have I seen that person since then? No. Did anything bad happen as a result of doing that? No. Did I feel unbelievably uncomfortable for maybe 20 minutes and then ceased to feel anything about it for 6 months? Yes. So what does it matter then? So, with that in mind, I've done half an hour and I'm really glad that I've done this. And anyone who's come this far, if it's just me listening, then fuck you. And if anyone else is listening, then I love you. And thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. This is what I'm going to be doing now because it's pretty fucking awesome. So I'll see you next time.